Welcome to Doc's Daily Dose for Dads, prescribed by Dr. Harrison. Okay, so I like to bring resources, especially ones that I personally believe in and that I utilize. Otherwise, if I'm just, talking out the side of my mouth about something I don't know about, then I'm not really sharing good information. So today I have with me a gentleman by the name of Jimmy Cusimano, who was born and raised here in LA. And he started a career with Northwestern Mutual in Newport Beach in 2007 as a college intern. After he graduated from University of Southern California, Irvine, he became a full-time financial advisor, and now he serves as wealth management advisor to clients like myself, as well as he mentors some of the younger and upcoming advisors in his agency. And I wanted to bring Jimmy on because I had a lot of different excuses why not to meet with this man or why not to get involved with things. And I think his approach, as well as the information that he provided, is what helped me understand the importance of managing my money for my family's future. So, Jimmy, thanks for coming on, man. How you doing today?
Doing well, Antonio. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So, I gave a little bit of information about you, but for the listeners, why don't you share who is Jimmy? What do you do?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So my title is a wealth management advisor or financial planner, and I think it's definitely one of those terms that I think can be loosely defined just because financial planning means so many different things to different people. But what I found is that it generally involves, five core areas. And I spent a majority of my career focusing on two of the five. So just kind of going through the five areas so that when we're talking about financial planning with a lot of our clients, it generally involves proper insurance planning.
Okay.
So specifically in our practice, we focus on the right life insurance solutions for clients. If they have families, like you mentioned, or businesses that they're trying to protect, making sure that they have adequate coverage, protect them should something happen. Disability insurance is the second thing that we help clients with as well. So I think for a lot of younger professionals or just working professionals in general, it's kind of easy to lose sight of the fact that your working income is probably your greatest asset, right? If you've got 10, 15, 20, 30 years left of income, that's got to be something that's addressed in terms of protecting that. So disability income, and then long-term care insurance. So for a lot of our clients, especially in the marketplace now, they've got parents or grandparents that are starting to get up there in age. And so I know that one of the big concerns for a lot of people in retirement or approaching it is just the cost of care, for themselves and their families. So that's pretty much everything in the insurance area. Investments is a second core factor in planning. So like you and I had talked about before, right? Like making sure you're putting away enough money for the future, retirement, education planning, and how you go about doing that, again, it's just going to depend on your situation, whether it's a 401k, IRA, mutual fund, something like that. So the other three areas, estate planning, making sure that you've got a proper will and a trust. Tax planning, making sure that you've got the right tax structure if you're a business owner or you're doing what you can to not pay Uncle Sam as much as more than you owe, right?
Right, exactly.
And then the last one's going to be around legal planning or legal advice. And so kind of a long-winded, answer to your question, but for many years, my team and I have been focusing on the first two, so insurance and investment planning. And then we'll go to other professionals to help clients with the other three.
Okay, cool. So why now one might say to themselves, that makes sense why this should be important for families to think about, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes in that common sense, we can get lost in what we actually don't know. So what, in your opinion, why is this important for families to start to think about?
It's interesting. I remember reading a statistic about just American households and American families when it comes to them losing sleep over money. Something
Right.
around like 65% of Americans actually lose sleep over money, and 90% of Americans have some thought in their head on a daily basis, and it's usually negative, in regards to their financial circumstance. And so I think that the reality of it is, and you even brought it up when you talked about it in the beginning, it's like, how many times did you fight the just common idea that you're going to meet with me at some point. And I know I called you several times. And so
Right.
I just think it's normal for people to put off, financial planning or talking about, critical issues, because the reality of it is that if you start to think about it on your own, it can be a negative thing. And so, just what I found, Antonio, is that if you're in a position where you're thinking about financial planning, talking to an advisor or to somebody that you trust, that knows what they're doing in regards to planning, it really can alleviate, a lot of that stress, and just understanding that there's somebody else, helping you get to where you want to get to, and really pull you off the treadmill of life, right? Because we're all busy. We all have a million things going on, family, businesses, things like that. But I think that that's the only way to alleviate that stress, is really to just address it head on with somebody that you trust.
Well, too, I think part of it as well is that there's a ignorance to money because we didn't have it growing up in education, right? Like that's not, handling your finances was not taught in elementary school. You were lucky if your mom or dad showed you what a checkbook looked like, a check, and those type of things, have a bank account.
It's not even taught in college.
Yes, it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So if I'm a family,
Mm-hmm.
no matter if, my kids are headed into college, I've just had my very first kid, or me and, I'm engaged and I'm starting to think about having children, at what point should I really start thinking about, maybe I want to sit down with the financial advisor and see what options are?
That's a good question. And I think most people are out there probably thinking that it may not be the right time, to have a conversation with an advisor. Either I don't have enough money to invest, or I really have to figure out my own debt situation, or maybe I'm a young professional. I don't have people that are really dependent on my income, so I just don't know if it's the right time. And I actually would say that there is no right time. I think that there's a financial advisor out there for everybody, in every circumstance. So after doing this for 11 years now, I think that there are categories of folks that my practice and our team can serve best. And, we can get into that maybe later. But I know when I was a young advisor, starting at 21 years old, most of the people I was helping were people that were around my age. So mid-20s, early 20s, 6 figures of debt, right? Probably more concerned with buying the 6-pack over the weekend than putting some money into an IRA.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
But I think that, and I truly believe that there is an advisor for everybody. So, if you're out there and you're not sure about what your, or if your circumstance is one that requires an advisor, I still recommend reaching out to, whether it's a referral or somebody that you trust, more importantly. And actually, I was thinking about this too, Antonio, is that I think for a lot of people that are working in bigger companies, and even some of the mid-sized companies that we're coming across, they're starting to provide, free consultations for financial planning.
Oh, wow.
It's something that it's like, hey, I've got a 401k through work, and I just want to know if I need to be putting away X amount for retirement. These 401k companies are paid, to advise some of their, the people that are participating in their plans to, really just make sure that they've got some guidance and some direction. So I think there's just tons of resources out there. It's just a matter of you actually taking the first step and, taking a meeting.
Yeah, and that's the great thing too, is it never hurts to sit down and have a conversation or ask questions, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, if and the only thing that comes out of it is a coffee and a talk, well, then that's the thing. But it's 15, 20, 30 minutes out of your time to be able to ask some questions that could potentially be great for your family. But let's go here then. So, because I know it was part of my first hesitation, I know a lot of times with individuals I know and reaching out to them about other things, it's, well, look, I live paycheck to paycheck. Like I've got rent, I've got bills, I've got kids. I'm trying to make sure everyone's fed.
Yeah.
Do like to like maybe go to the movies or Magic Mountain or something. Happens, but there's no way in the world I can afford to take this extra money and put it over here for life insurance.
Right.
What's your response to folks who talk about their circumstances with respect to that challenge of finding the money for it?
Right. I think the answer is that you shouldn't be doing that on your own, right? Like finding the money to do planning. That's, if that was the case, then I wouldn't have a job, right? I think advisors out there wouldn't exist if clients can do this on their own. Somebody once told me that life costs as much as you make. And I find that to be really, really true, in most circumstances. So, I've had experiences where I've been working with prospective clients that are making $50,000. And that could very much be the case, right? They are living paycheck to paycheck. They have very little discretionary income to save, but we have to sit down with them, right? Go through a budget and help them find the dollars. If it's really important for them to get this planning going, right? And then on the other hand, Antonio, I've also met with clients that have made $5 million. And believe it or not, they're living pretty close to paycheck to paycheck.
All the toys and everything else they got, huh?
Exactly, right? What was once luxury becomes necessity.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's just, to be quite frank with you, I think that there's an epidemic out there of bad financial planning advice. And I'm not saying that that's coming from advisors or from people that people are talking to that they trust when it comes to, trying to get help with financial advising. I think a lot of financial advisors out there are really noble, and they're in a profession that really requires them to go out and put their best foot forward and help others first. I just think that there's a lot of training out there that really gets advisors to try and solve the problem for their clients before they diagnose what the problem is. So, a lot of this podcast, a lot of the work that you do, right? I mean, how much of it is what goes on, between years?
Yeah.
And so I think that, to your point about there's a lot of people that maybe sometimes are fighting planning. It's mostly because they've just been told what to do without really knowing if that was important for them. So I think, when you're talking to a professional or you're meeting with an advisor, it's more about the questions that they ask you versus the solutions that they're trying to give you.
No, I can agree with that, and second that with respect to in working with you, there were always options. It was I never felt like this was the only route I had to go or I had to go down, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that allowed for questions, and quite honestly, there are so many different things that happen in places where money can be pulled to where it depends on your priorities, right? And talking about and sharing with you about my family was like, yeah, my family is a priority. Maybe we don't have to buy this thing over here, or maybe, I could save up for this thing instead of making a huge, large lump sum.
Right.
So whatever you place importance on is definitely what, is going to get taken care of.
Yeah, and it makes me think about the phrase that accountability without purpose is harassment.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you were to tell somebody, hey, I'm going to hold you accountable to put 20% of your paycheck towards retirement because it's what you should do. It's not going to happen.
No,
right? It's not going to happen. I mean, and that's where there is just so much cognitive dissonance out there in the marketplace when it comes to, financial advisors trying to help clients, but they're just seeing a lack of follow through because they're not finding out what's truly important to them first.
Now, I don't know how much you can share, if you've got to give coded names, if you make it a scenario learned in school, but I wanted to get a positive and a negative to highlight the space between, what financial planning can do for you and your family and what happens if you don't think about it too much. So if you can share, are there any circumstances or a particular circumstances that was particularly unfortunate with someone not taking the time to think about the priority of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think about my 11 years of doing this, so far. And there's just so many stories, so many people that I've had the opportunity to meet. And it's really what makes my job so special, right? Is every day is a different day. And so I think that a lot of that, most of the time, when it comes to financial planning, a lot of what you hear out there in the marketplace is going to be really focused around what we call the offensive side. So people are talking about, hey, how do we allocate your portfolios the right way? How do we manage your investments? How do we get you to save enough for retirement, education funding, you name it. And I think that a lot of the times people aren't really making sure that they have a strong foundation around the defensive side. So I know, again, you're a big football guy, big sports guy, the offense and defense. Defense is really what gets overlooked. And so I wanted to start with that because in my 11 years of doing this, I've paid out 2 life insurance claims and probably about 24 to 25 disability insurance claims. So that's almost 2, injuries or illnesses, or in terms of incidents of those things happening, almost 2 a year, right, in this business. And so I'll share with you, on the life insurance side, one story in particular was a gentleman that was a very successful young attorney. And when we had first got together to do planning for him, he was in the midst of dating somebody, so he was getting serious about potentially starting a family. He had probably about $350,000 of student loans. And so a lot of the time, focus, and energy naturally is going to be around, hey, what's the responsible way to pay down that debt, but also save for the future. And by the way, at that point, he wasn't thinking about life insurance in particular. And one of the questions that I had asked him around his student loan was I said, hey, did you end up refinancing your student loan? And he said, yeah. And so one of the things when it comes to student loans, especially for the listeners out there that have student loans, is that if you refinance, most of the time, that loan doesn't get forgiven if you pass away. So in his situation, that was the case. So the $350,000, because it was refinanced with a private carrier, should something happen to him, his family, or in this case, his parents, because he wasn't married yet, they would get that debt passed down to them.
Wow.
And so he came, you talked about humble beginnings earlier, and so he came from a very humble beginning, just like you and I, and we talked about how that just wasn't an option for him. He said, hey, should something happen to me, I got to make sure that that debt is paid off because I can't put that on my family. So we took out a life insurance policy on him for 2 reasons. One, obviously, is to protect that. 2 is because he wanted to get married, wanted to start a family. And so being young and healthy, it made a lot of sense for him to do that at the time. And so about 6 months ago, I actually got a text from his brother saying that he had suffered a heart attack. Ironically, and by God's good graces, he was actually in a medical facility just for a regular checkup, 33 years old. But he suffered a heart attack in a medical facility. So there was help there initially to, again, get him, on a bed, get him rested. Unfortunately, he had lost consciousness later that night, and 2 days later, he had passed away from complications. And I would tell you, Antonio, that delivering that life insurance check to his parents was one of the most humbling experiences that I've ever had. And I think that for most of us out there, again, we're not thinking about that. And think about a young guy, 33 years old. He qualified for life insurance, so we know that he was healthy. But to have that happen out of nowhere really just put some perspective on what proper planning can do in situations like that, right, that are extremely unfortunate.
That's got to be kind of a I don't even know the word I want to use, a unique facet of your job, in that when there's usually large sums of money, people consider it windfalls, right?
Mhm.
But when it's attached to something devastating that's happened, you're the doctor coming to break the news again.
Right.
Like, yeah, I got a little something to kind of help you guys out here. Is that something that, kind of switching gears here, was that something that you were taught about when you were at school for this? Was this something that you can't really prepare for until it happens?
Yeah.
Because that just seems like it's got to be kind of tough and heavy to deal with in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. It's definitely the latter. It's definitely one of the things that you learn when something happens like that, right? I think one of the beautiful things about this career, and in particular the situation I'm in with other advisors that are running their own practices around me, is that I have, I've had and I still have mentors, in this business that have been around for decades. And it's one thing to hear the story about delivering a life insurance check to a spouse or to a parent or to an organization, but it's another thing to actually experiencing firsthand.
Right.
And I would say that, the biggest thing when it comes to life insurance planning is that I never want to be in a position where I'm delivering a check, to a spouse or to a loved one, and it's just not the right number, right? It's not the right amount.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the thing, is that no beneficiary, no spouse, no child, no parent is ever going to say that this is too much money.
Yeah.
Never going to say that.
Never.
Right? Because the reality of it is that that person needed every penny of that, to begin with.
Well, let's flip it. Give me something on the lighter side that's I don't know, a happy or a great feeling or moment of joy in having to deliver some sort of check, or call someone and say, here's what your account has built to.
Yeah.
Time to retire.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. That's a great question. So I think that that's one of the things too, is that kind of going back to what I said earlier about having the ability to meet people where they're at in life. And so I feel like I'm 33 years old going on 63 just because of just the experiences of my clients, and
right. Yeah.
time with them. And so just people at every stage in life. And I would say one story that comes to mind for me is that there was a client of mine that I met when I was in my second year of the business. And she was at the time 63, I believe, Antonio, so 63 years old. And she was about 2 months away from retiring.
Okay.
And so this is, again, my second year in the business. So I was probably 22, 23 years old. And she actually called me. She was a referral from one of my clients. And she said, hey, Jimmy, I've built up some money in my 401k, and I want to meet with you because I want to make sure that when I retire, I never run out of money.
Nice.
I never run out of money, and I want to be able to travel, do the things I want to do, spend time with my family. And I'll tell you, quite frankly, that 2 years into the business, I was pretty nervous. For her to tell me, I think, no pressure, right? I've just got the fate of the rest of your life, in my hands here. So, I went to a mentor, made sure that we did the right planning. And so this actually happened about a year ago. She worked a little longer than what she wanted to, just because she loved what she did. She was a private practice doctor. So she retired at the age of 70. And what was really cool to see was that when we were in that moment, when I met with her and we went through all of her accounts, we talked about what she wanted to do with the balance of her life, just to be able to tell her, hey, you can retire. It's going to be okay. You can walk away from your practice. You can feel good about it and spend the rest of your life just being present with your family.
Right.
It's going to be okay. And so it's gratifying, right? I think it's also the journey that we had to get there over 7 years. But that's one of the things I really enjoy the most about my business, is really helping clients, get into a fruitful retirement.
Nice. I like it. All right, Jimmy, I got one more question for you here. I always talk about the notion of gurus and experts, and there's more gurus today than there are ever. And I think one of the things a lot of people never ask, or fail to ask, or fail to realize is a lot of times it's not about necessarily doing what the guru says, right? It's about doing what the guru did. If this guy went off and read 20 books and wrote, a paper about each, go read yourself some books and write some papers, right? Don't just take what he learned from that. In that sense, I want to ask you, as the financial advisor, dealing with wealth management, what is it that you want to do for your family? I mean, I'm curious more. I'm sure there's probably life insurance and things like that to protect them, which I'm curious about that. But I'm also curious, is there specific tips or tricks that you do? Like when a paycheck comes, you make sure to take 15 to 20% and put it away. You keep something tucked under the bed for a rainy day, So I'm curious, what are some of your tips and tricks and suggestions that you do or plan on doing for your family?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I mean, it's funny, right? Because I think that it's like the doctor that sometimes forgets to, take their own blood pressure. Get their own, I won't lie and tell you that I've always been the best, taker of my advice. I think that now I'm in a position where, I'm really going to start to have to eat my own cooking. I'm getting married in September.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. So I know that, my fiance and I have talked about starting a family and doing those things. So I've always just been a big believer in getting as much life insurance as I can qualify for, just because when you're young and healthy, it's very affordable, to pick up the coverage. And again, knowing that I do want to have a family and do those things in the future, just knowing that I'm in a position now where I don't have to worry about trying to get more coverage later when who knows, knock on wood, what might happen to my health. I've got my practice, right, that we've grown. I said me a lot during this podcast, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up my team. I've got a team of 3 phenomenal human beings, Stephanie, McKenna, and Kathy. And so in our practice, I've instilled a small 401k. So it allows me to put some money away for me, and then also to match some of their contributions, right, for them and their families. And then I would say lastly too, Antonio, and this is probably the case for a lot of professionals or businesses or business owners out there, is, my business and what I do for a living is really what I would consider my home run savings opportunity or financial asset, I guess you can say. So for every listener out there, whether it's your job that provides you a tremendous amount of upside, whether it's with higher compensation or stock options, something like that, that's your home run. Whether it's the business owner. So Antonio, I know for you, right, like you and your business and this podcast, it's your baby, right? I mean, our businesses are our baby. And there is nothing that myself or other financial advisors or any other financial advisor out there can do or recommend that's going to get you a better rate of return, whether it's in life insurance or the stock market, whatever it may be, than what you can get in your business. And so I think it's delineating your home run dollars, your career, your business, real estate, if that's the case, whatever it may be, with the other areas of planning, like the traditional retirement accounts, 401ks, buying life insurance, things like that. So I wanted to just kind of end on that note, because I do want to just let everybody understand that your situation is going to be unique. It's going to be different. And so we all have our home run bucket. It's a matter of how is the planner going to build the plan around.
I like that. Individualized, tailored to the client.
Totally.
Should be.
Totally.
I mean, I really appreciate you jumping on and sharing this information and knowledge. I think it's extremely important for parents to understand. I finally understood the importance and realized, like, hey, maybe I don't need to have tacos 3 times a night. Like, I can put those to the side and get some life insurance going here. But how can people get a hold of you if they want to reach out, if they want to, ask questions, have some, get some advice, potentially start managing their wealth?
Yeah. Thanks for asking that. So I think that for one, you can definitely reach me. My office line is 949-863-5852. Either myself or somebody on my team would take your call. And, I think it just starts with having some perspective on your situation, right? So for anybody out there listening, if you just want to have a consultation, about your situation and really figure out what's the next step or where you should go from here, uh, anybody in our team would be glad to help you and give you some feedback. So feel free to reach out. And Antonio, you have my email address if you want to send that out there as well. But I truly, again, believe that there is an advisor out there for anybody. So whether it's our team or somebody out there that you guys trust, take that first step, right? Like have that conversation so that you can really just spend the rest of your life being present and living, just experiencing the now. So.
Nice. Well, Jimmy, I appreciate your time, man. I definitely think this is going to be great for some people to hear as a resource. And yeah, thank you so much. And I'll be touching base soon, man.
Thanks, Antonio. Take care, man. Stay cool out there.
I will. I'll try.
See you, man.
Bye. Well, folks, that's Doc's Daily Dose for Dads. Don't forget to hashtag Doc's Daily Dose for Dads, hashtag 4D, all social media at RebirthDX. You can get the audio format of this on Apple iTunes, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Google Play Music. Check out the website, rebirthdx.com. This was, I hesitated at first to do the show because I thought, people are going to see something about finance or advising or wealth management, life insurance. Like, I don't want to be sold anything. I don't want to, and I thought, people are going to give it a negative connotation at first because that's kind of what I did when I first heard about it. But as I thought more about it and had family, I said, let me just talk to this guy. And after talking to him and you guys being on the show here or listening and watching, I think you understand now why I wanted to bring him on. He's not about making the sale. He's not about this is the only thing I do or, go this direction. He's almost a wealth scientist in the sense that I'm a behavior scientist and everything we do is tailored to the individual. This man is a wealth scientist. He knows all about money and financial planning, and he tailors what fits best to his individual client. He's not out here trying to make you go broke. He's trying out here to make sure that your family doesn't go broke when you pass away or when you get sick. So that's why I really wanted to share that resource and maybe to get people to start thinking about, is this something that I need to think about? Is this something I need to do? Right? I know that I've got 3 kids and a wife. If I pass away, will they be able to easily transition into sustaining the current lifestyle, or are they going to have to go backwards? At minimum, I want them to stay exactly where they are and be comfortable. I'd love for them to continue to progress. But if what I can provide while I'm no longer on this earth is that minimum, then that's what I'm going to do. And if that requires me not to have tacos, 3 nights a week, it requires me to save 10% of everything I earn, or just instead of forget the 10%, just when I get my paychecks and I've covered all the bills, here's the extra lump sum I have left over, cutting that in half and just sticking it in savings to then be able to pay things. That's what I'm going to do. And you know what the funny thing is? You think, oh, the $150, $200, $300 a month, like I can't afford that. The moment you put it into being automatically drafted out of your account, somehow you end up taking care of it. Just like you do when the car breaks down, you got to get that fixed. Just like you do when you want to get a membership to 24-hour fitness and to, the gym, or a membership to some, box thing that gets delivered to your house. It's mystery gifts. Somehow you're able to come up with the money. Same thing here, but it's all about your priorities. So that's all I wanted to share. Maybe I should have done That's Doc's Daily Dose for Dads now, which I just did. All right, y'all. I'll holler at you later.